The object that ended my daughter-in-law's entire scheme was a gray hearing aid programmer case she left on the passenger seat of my car one Tuesday afternoon. Inside it, tucked beneath the foam cutout for the no-link wireless interface, was the original partnership contract she thought she had burned. That single piece of paper voided a $670,000 asset sale, triggered a federal fraud docket, and put my daughter-in-law in a community service smock that reads amplified lies across the back. Now I own the clinic, renamed Canal of Deceit Hearing, and every audiogram we print carries her fraud case number in the footer. This is the story of how a retired nurse, a dead man's warning, and a 5-pin deadbolt turned the tables on two people who thought they could take everything. My name is Mary Alvarez, and I am a registered nurse. I retired after 31 years on hospital night shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., mostly in the cardiac step-down unit. I have held the hands of dying strangers, called time of death on people I had known for 6 hours, and learned to read a patient's face before the monitor even beeped. I drained $139,000 from my nursing pension to co-found a hearing aid fitting and repair clinic with my daughter-in-law, Renee. I did it for my husband, Harold, who was losing his hearing faster than his dignity, and for the seniors at my church who were being quoted $4,000 for a pair of aids they did not need. Renee notarized a 50% stake for me and promised free device cleanings for those church seniors every third Saturday. The one detail that paid off later was that I kept the clinic's books every Sunday after church, so I could read a balance sheet faster than most people read a menu. Before nursing school, my father taught me how to open a 5-pin deadbolt without leaving a mark. He was a locksmith for 30 years, and he believed that a woman should know how to get through any door she was legally entitled to open. Harold, the quiet architect of our family's boundaries, would later use that lesson without ever knowing it. Harold died on a Thursday morning in March. A massive stroke, right there in his recliner while watching the 6 o'clock news. I found him with the remote still in his hand and the coffee cup still warm on the side table. The paramedics said it was likely instant, but I know he held on long enough to set something in motion, because that was the kind of man he was. My son Daniel arrived the next afternoon with Renee. Daniel had always been the golden child, the one we bailed out of a failed snowboard shop in his 20s and a failed smoothie franchise in his 30s. He had a way of making every business failure sound like the economy's fault. Renee was the polished one, a former pharmaceutical sales rep with a notary stamp in her glove compartment and a way of saying we that always meant me. They hugged me at the door, but their eyes were already on the house. The appraisal value, the furniture, the detached garage. I saw it in the way Daniel's gaze drifted to Harold's tool bench and the way Renee's hand lingered on the granite countertop. While I was still making coffee for the visitors, Renee opened the drawer of Harold's desk and pulled out his old hearing aid case. It was a brown leather clamshell with a broken hinge and a scratch like a lightning bolt across the front. He had carried that case for 10 years before he got his first pair of behind-the-ear aids, and even after he upgraded, he kept it for old batteries and cleaning tools. Renee held it up between 2 fingers like a dead mouse and said, "This is trash, Mary. Toss it." I watched it land in a black garbage bag. Daniel said, "We'll get a dumpster for the rest of this junk." I said nothing because I was too busy memorizing the exact angle of the case as it settled among coffee grounds and potato peels. That night, after they left, I waited until the porch light clicked off and the motion sensor reset. I pulled the garbage bag from the can, untied the yellow drawstring, and carried the case to the kitchen table. It was light, but something shifted inside, a dry whisper of paper against foam, a sound I had not heard in years but recognized instantly. I opened the case. Under the foam pad where Harold used to keep his first pair of aids, there was a folded piece of paper, thin as a Bible page and soft from being pressed for weeks. In Harold's tight, careful handwriting, it said, "Do not trust them. Save yourself. The proof is in the gray programmer case. The credit union has a copy. I am sorry I could not tell you in person. I read it 3 times, then I read it again under the brighter light of the stove hood." My husband, who could never remember to replace the toilet paper, had hidden a warning inside a hearing aid case he knew Renee would throw away because he trusted me to retrieve it. That was Harold. He never raised his voice, but he built quiet walls. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that family and fraud should never share a last name. Daniel and Renee moved me into their guest room 2 days later. They said it was to take care of me, but I noticed Renee had already cleared out Harold's office and set up a lockbox in the hall closet. She used the word transition a lot, and she said it with the same tone she used to use when selling a new cholesterol drug to a skeptical doctor. Daniel kept putting a pen in my hand. He had a stack of papers an inch thick, a power of attorney, a quitclaim deed on my house, a medical directive that named Renee as my healthcare proxy, and a care agreement that gave her authority over my bank accounts. Renee smiled and said, "We just need to get everything squared away while you're grieving, Mom." I played weak, foggy, compliant. I let my hand tremble when I held the pen. I told them I wanted to read everything when my head was clearer, maybe after the funeral, maybe after I had slept. I did not sign a single page. I also did not tell them that I had already photographed every document with my phone and sent the images to my old email address, the one Renee did not know about. The password was Harold's grandmother's maiden name, and I changed it twice a week. The guest room was a converted office with a narrow window and a lock on the inside that Renee had removed. I noticed that immediately, the way a nurse notices a missing pulse. The sheets were stiff and smelled like lavender dryer sheets, and the only thing on the nightstand was a framed photo of Daniel and Renee at their wedding, the one where I was cropped out. I did not sleep that first night. I lay awake and listened to the furnace kick on and off, and I thought about Harold's handwriting, and I thought about the gray programmer case and where it could be. That first week, Renee handed me an envelope and said it was my share of an equipment sale. The check inside was for $4,400, and the memo line said earmold. I knew the clinic's patient roster alone was worth over $300,000, and that check was an insult designed to see if I was too foggy to notice. I folded it and put it in my Bible, where I kept papers I was not ready to act on. Over the next few weeks, I watched. Renee took phone calls on the back deck with her shoulders hunched, and she would say, "No, not yet. She has not signed," then hang up and paint a smile on her face before she came back inside. Daniel started ordering custom patio furniture and a 65-inch television. He did not have a job, but he had a new credit card with a limit that seemed to grow every time he opened a package. Renee bought a $200 bottle of face serum and left the receipt on the kitchen counter, right next to a flyer for an estate sale at a neighbor's house. The clinic's business line of credit had been maxed out, and I could see from the bank app on my phone that the balance had jumped by $40,000 in 1 week. Renee had tried to remove me from the account, but the bank still sent paper statements to my post office box because Harold had never trusted online-only delivery. That was Harold's quiet architecture, and I blessed him for it every time I walked to the mailbox. The garbage disposal jammed on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel stood over the sink with a butter knife and a look of confused frustration, and Renee was on hold with a plumber, sighing into her phone. I walked over, turned off the breaker under the sink, reached in with a wooden spoon handle, and freed a lamb bone from the impeller plate. I reset the thermal overload button, turned the breaker back on, and the disposal ran with a clean, satisfying grind. Daniel said I was about to do that. I said, "Of course you were." That was the first time I saw Renee look at me with something other than pity. It was a flash of cold assessment, like a nurse evaluating a patient who might be faking it. I tucked that look away for later. I found a shredded document in the recycling bin. It was a draft of a partnership dissolution with my name misspelled as Mary instead of Mary. The shredder had jammed on the thicker paper, so the pieces were long enough to read. I took the entire bag of shredding out to the garage, spread it on a flattened cardboard box, and spent 2 hours sorting strips by edge shape and fiber pattern. I used Scotch tape from the junk drawer and a magnifying glass from Harold's old kit, and by midnight, I had reconstructed enough of the document to see the date, the forged signature, and the name of a notary, Renee Alvarez. The notary stamp had expired 3 years earlier, which was a detail I filed away. I also found a second page with a wire transfer instruction to an account in the Cayman Islands, in the name of a shell company called Clear Sweep Holdings. Renee had typed the routing number incorrectly the first time, and there was a sticky note with the corrected number in her handwriting. I kept the reconstructed document in a manila envelope under the spare tire in my car, because the guest room was not safe. Renee had a locked filing cabinet in the guest room closet, the one she had moved from Harold's office. The lock was a cheap wafer lock, the kind used on filing cabinets and desk drawers, with 4 wafers and no security pins. Before nursing school, my father taught me how to open a 5-pin deadbolt without leaving a mark, but a filing cabinet lock is simpler. It is about tension and feel, about knowing when the wafers have caught at the shear line. I used a tension wrench made from a windshield wiper insert and a small rake pick my father had given me when I was 19. The lock turned in 8 seconds. I heard each wafer click into place, soft and final, like a heartbeat on a monitor. Inside was a folder labeled Asset Sale. The national audiology chain, Clear Tone Hearing, had offered $670,000 for the patient roster and the equipment. The offer letter was dated 6 weeks before Harold died, and it listed every piece of equipment by serial number, including the no-link wireless interface and the audiometer. Renee had signed my name on a dissolution document and had it notarized, but the notary stamp was her own, and the date was 3 weeks before Harold died. I studied the signature against the original on Harold's old insurance cards, and I saw the tiny hesitation at the top of the capital M, the way she had leaned too hard on the downstroke. I am a nurse, not a handwriting expert, but 31 years of reading doctors' orders had taught me to notice small inconsistencies. There was also a predatory loan against the clinic's accounts receivable, with my name as the personal guarantor. She had forged that signature too, more confidently this time, because she had practiced it. The loan was from an online lender that charged 29% interest and had a confession of judgment clause, which meant that if the business defaulted, the lender could seize my personal assets without a court hearing. If the sale to Clear Tone went through, I would be on the hook for the loan, while Renee and Daniel walked away with the proceeds. The folder also included a printout of an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, in the name of a shell company called Clear Sweep Holdings, with the same routing number from the sticky note. Renee had opened that account using a copy of my driver's license and a forged signature card. The photo on the license was from 10 years ago, when I still had brown hair and a hospital badge. I started keeping a small notebook, the kind nurses use for shift report, the kind with a spiral top and a hard cardboard cover. I logged every phone call, every receipt, every time Daniel said the estate instead of Dad. I logged the day Renee opened 3 new credit cards in my name and changed the billing address to their house. The credit bureau alert hit my phone at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. I froze my credit before sunrise, using the automated phone system and my mother's maiden name as the security word. I did not tell them. I also noticed that Renee had a burner phone in her nightstand drawer, the kind you buy with cash at a gas station. I saw it when she asked me to get her reading glasses from the bedroom, and I opened the wrong drawer by accident. She used it only for calls to a number with a 345 area code, which is the Cayman Islands. I memorized the number and wrote it down later, using a pencil on the inside cover of my notebook. Then I tore the page out and burned it over the bathroom sink. The gray programmer case was still in my car. Renee had borrowed the car 2 days earlier to run to the clinic for what she called a supply pickup, and she left the case on the passenger seat. I had not opened it because I was too busy playing Foggy. Now I went out to the garage after midnight, opened the passenger door, and the dome light came on like a tiny interrogation lamp. The case was a gray plastic clamshell with the no-link wireless interface inside, the device we used to program hearing aids wirelessly from a laptop. I opened it to make sure the interface was still there, and under the foam cutout I saw a folded document. It was the original partnership contract, the one Renee had notarized, with my actual signature and hers, stating I owned 50% of the clinic and that any sale required both original partners to be physically present before a notary. Harold had written a note on the back. I made a copy for the credit union. If you are reading this, she forged the dissolution. The case was never in her office. I stood there in the garage holding that piece of paper, and I could almost hear Harold's voice, calm and low, saying, "Mary, she is not as smart as she thinks." I took the original contract with me and hid it in the spare tire well with the reconstructed shred. The next morning, I drove to the church office after Sunday service and used the landline there because I did not trust the phone in the guest room. I called the credit union. The compliance officer was a woman named Patricia Okonkwo. She had been a compliance officer for 11 years, and she spoke with the kind of precision that comes from too many regulatory audits. I told her my name, my account number, and the last 4 digits of my social, and then I said, "I think my daughter-in-law is trying to steal my business and frame me for the debt." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that means the person on the other end is already opening a case file. "Patricia," said Mrs. Alvarez, "we have been watching this account for 3 weeks. The notary stamp on your daughter-in-law's dissolution documents expired 3 years ago, and the original partnership contract was missing from the file. We flagged the sale documents for review, and we froze the transfer to clear tone pending verification. She asked me if I knew anything about a restricted business account, and I said no, not yet. Then she told me about Harold's dead man's switch. 3 weeks before his death, Harold had filed a certified restriction on the business account. It was a type of account control that required my physical presence, a fingerprint scan, and a live video confirmation to release any asset transfer over $10,000. He had attached a copy of the original partnership contract to the restriction, along with a notarized affidavit stating that any dissolution or sale not personally witnessed by me and Patricia was invalid. He had also included a letter, handwritten, that said, "If I am dead, it is not an accident. She forged the dissolution." The credit union has a copy. The instruction was to notify law enforcement and freeze all assets until Mary Alvarez could be located and verified. "Patricia," said Mrs. Alvarez, "we have filed a suspicious activity report with FinCEN. We have also contacted the FBI field office because the wire transfer crosses international borders. We need you to come in and give a statement, but first, I need to ask you a question. Do you have the original contract?" I said yes, I have it in my hand. She said, "Good. Bring it with you. Do not tell anyone you are coming." I told her I would, but first I needed to test one more thing. I needed to know how far Daniel and Renee would go, and I needed to know it before I walked into a federal investigation with my son's wife. So I staged a fake collapse in the kitchen. I waited until Daniel and Renee were both home, and I waited until the kitchen was quiet. I had eaten almost nothing that day, so my blood sugar was actually low, which made the collapse more convincing. I grabbed the edge of the counter, let my knees buckle, and hit the floor with a sound that made the pendant light swing. I lay still, eyes half closed, breathing slow and shallow. I heard Daniel's footsteps first, then Renee's. I heard the scrape of a chair, then the slide of papers across the island. Daniel stepped over my arm. He did not check my pulse. He did not say my name. He reached for the stack of papers on the island, the same papers I had refused to sign. Renee stepped over my legs and said, "Is she out? Get the power of attorney signed before she comes around." I watched through slitted eyes as Daniel picked up my hand and tried to wrap my fingers around a pen. His grip was cold and dry, and his thumb pressed into my knuckles as he guided the pen toward the signature line. Renee was saying, "Hurry, hurry, we only have a few minutes." That was the moment every residual feeling I had for my son died. I sat up slowly and said, "I'm fine, just low blood sugar." They never once asked if I was okay. Daniel dropped the pen and stepped back, and Renee smiled and said, "Oh, thank goodness, we were so worried." But I saw the flash of anger in her eyes, the same cold assessment I had seen at the sink. 3 days later, they marched me to the credit union. Renee had told me we were going to brunch, and she even put a small vase of flowers on the kitchen table to sell the lie. Instead, she drove to the bank and parked in the fire lane. Daniel grabbed my elbow and steered me inside, his fingers digging into the soft skin above my elbow. Patricia was waiting behind the glass, and she nodded once when she saw me. Renee slid a stack of documents across the counter and said, "My mother-in-law is ready to sign the dissolution and the asset release. She has been unwell, so I am here to assist." The documents had my forged signature already on them and a blank notary block. Renee handed me a pen. It was a heavy silver pen with a clip, the kind you get from a pharmaceutical company. I looked at her and said, "I have spent 31 years saving people from their own bodies. I am not going to let you sign my name." I set the pen down on the counter, and I heard the soft click of it against the laminate. Patricia pressed a button under her desk. 2 federal agents stepped out of the office behind the teller line. They had the folder from Renee's filing cabinet, the taped-together shred, the original contract from the programmer case, and a printout of the offshore account where Renee had wired the loan money. One agent was a woman with a severe bun and an FBI badge clipped to her belt. The other was a man from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. The woman said, "Renee Alvarez, Daniel Alvarez, you are under arrest." Daniel started crying. Renee started talking, fast and smooth, saying this was all a misunderstanding, saying she was only trying to help her mother-in-law, saying the documents must have been switched. The agents read them their rights, and Renee kept talking even as they handcuffed her. I stood there and watched, and I did not say a word. The aftermath unfolded over 18 months, and I tracked every detail in my notebook, not because I was obsessed, but because I needed to know the exact shape of what they had tried to do. Renee was charged with bank fraud, wire fraud, falsifying a notarized document, identity theft, and money laundering. Daniel pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and received probation plus 500 hours of community service. Renee was sentenced to 14 months in federal prison, followed by 300 hours of community service. The judge assigned those hours to my clinic. The asset sale to Clear Tone was voided because the original partnership contract proved I owned 50% and had never consented. Clear Tone hearing withdrew their offer and paid a small settlement to avoid litigation. The predatory loan was voided because my signature was forged and the lender had failed basic identity verification. I got my clinic back, plus a civil judgment against Renee for $139,000, the exact amount of my pension. She has not paid a cent of it, but the judgment accrues interest, and her wages are garnished from the community service stipend she receives. The clinic reopened as Canal of Deceit Hearing. I changed the name myself, and I ordered new signage from a local printer. Renee now sanitizes earmolds in a pale blue smock that says Amplified lies across the back. She has to clock in and out, and she has to sign a log every time she touches a patient's device. Every audiogram we print carries her fraud-docket number in the footer, because I updated the software template myself. The seniors at my church still get free cleanings every third Saturday, and I teach a weekly class on how to spot financial elder abuse. Harold's gray programmer case sits on a shelf behind the front desk, open, with a small brass plate that says the original contract. There is a difference between family and blood. The quiet architect of our boundaries, Harold, had already seen the shape of their betrayal and built a wall I did not know I needed. I learned that integrity does not require a loud voice. It requires a locked filing cabinet, a taped-together shred, and a woman who refuses to sign. I also learned that 31 years of night shifts teach you more than how to read a heart monitor. They teach you how to stay calm when someone is trying to kill you, and how to recognize the moment when a pulse stops, whether it is a patient's or a son's. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? If you believe that family and fraud should never share a last name, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.